Alrighty, so if you've been playing the game over the past week, you've probably noticed that in your mail, they have been giving you Holy Relic materials for a bird relic. So we are just getting a full free bird relic for whatever reason, which is, honestly, I mean, I'm not going to complain, even though I already have all of the bird relics at this point. I mean, I guess it's nice if they ever decide to add new bird relics, which seems unlikely, but hey, you know, I'm holding out hope. We're crossing our fingers on that one. Basically, what I want to do is go through each of the relics, tell you whether or not I think it's useful or I've gotten use out of it, and, you know, obviously you might already have some of the bird relics. If you don't have any of them, I would definitely recommend going over maybe some of them more than others, or just grabbing ones that might be more useful to you. So, there are 33 of them, so I guess it's nice that they are giving out a free one because there are so many, but honestly, most of them are pretty bad. But yeah, before we hop in, I do want to say if you're new to the channel or anything, feel free to subscribe, so that way you can kind of come by and hang out with us again. We do a lot of different Grand Cross content every day. So yeah, either way. So let's hop into this thing. Before I start with any or like the individuals, I do want to say that if you have already built relics for all the ones that you get use out of, maybe, I would definitely recommend building a relic that has a lot of characters as just like a default sort of like, hey, this is going to give me the most CC or most stats for my box and everything. Because, like, you know, there's a couple of ones that give you 4 characters. You know, Brawler Bond right here is obviously a pretty decent example. Arthur also gives you 4 characters. Gother also gives you 4 characters. I want to say that might be all. There's a couple that give you 3 characters, of course, but obviously, you're not going to want to build relics for ones that just give you 1 character over the other ones because you're just going to get more CC out of the other ones. So, starting with Brawler Bond, I do recommend that if you have Ragnarok Bond, he is a really good versatile backline unit that you can use pretty much on any team. And honestly, just grabbing his Holy Relic will be a nice little CC boost for him. Considering he's so old, he does not have great CC, so getting every little bit that you can get is fantastic. So, would recommend. Nunchuck Bond is bad. I have not used his relic, and I've not used a Nunchuck Bond in well over a year, maybe even 2 years at this point, so I can't really recommend it. Purgatory Bond's relic is good for his kit, but he's very old at this point. He is not really used in PvP at all, and he is basically only used for the random PvE activity from time to time, depending on what that is. It could be guild boss, whatever the case may be. His relic is okay. He's a festival unit. I normally would say, you know, if you want to invest as much into festival units as you can, but hey, if you don't get use out of the character, there's not really any point in building it for him at the moment. Maybe you hold off, grab it later whenever you can farm out the bird a little bit more. Lilia's is absolutely trash, just really bad, just so dumb. She should have got something way better than that. Awakened Lilia, on the other hand, this is actually a really good relic. This one is pretty much what even made her useful in the first place, so if you do want to use Catastrophes at all, or use Christmas Lilia for basically the main attraction here, the other one is fine too, but she's not nearly as good as the Christmas one. If you have her, the relic is very, very helpful. She's kind of been power crept at this point, so she's not super relevant anymore, but, you know, having that relic is a big part of her kit, which makes her actually a good unit. So, moving on, we have Arthur. I really like Arthur's relic. I think it's really good, but at the same time, none of these Arthurs are going to be PvP relevant, and basically only the green one is going to be any good in PvE, aside from maybe the rare chance that you can use Red Arthur because he has a good buff card. But even then, I think there's better characters that buff nowadays, so you might not even really be able to use him. A halfway decent relic. It starts the match off with you putting a debuff on, so you can kind of get the use out of Sigurd's passive, which is really nice. Those two pair up really well together. But overall, not super useful anymore, but I do like the relic. I think it's very good. Or I say very good. It's good. It's okay. Excalibur Arthur is one that I would probably recommend you invest into if you haven't already gotten it, just because the human team is kind of on the uptrend right now. There's a lot of humans coming out, sort of support and everything coming up, and if you can run a full human team because of his passive requiring that, you can obviously get some good use out of him. He can tank for you, and having him be able to sort of res himself, or not res, but like fully heal himself if he gets down to a certain amount of HP, I would definitely recommend it. Personal preference, I would recommend using blue Tarmiel on him instead of red Tarmiel, because most of the time, for me specifically, Red Tarmiel ends up screwing up his Holy Relic, and I can't end up getting it off because you have to have him below 20% HP, and that sweet spot is really hard to hit with the Red Tarmiel link, like healing you past it, or, you know, if you're already that low, you're more than likely going to get one shot anyway before his Holy Relic is, or before the Tarmiel link is going to heal it back up anyway. So recommend Blue Tarmiel. Anyway, Easton's Relic, I don't think I've ever got any use out of it, so can't recommend it. Same thing with Mono. I don't think I've ever even used one of these Monos since this Relic has come out, so that's kind of unfortunate. The Blue Mono I maybe have used in some sort of PvE activity, but she's PvE only, so that makes sense. Not really sure I would go for that anytime soon, really. Base Escanor is a pretty bad Relic. I'm not very happy with how that one turned out, so I don't know that I would go out of my way to get it. Plus, there's much better units to use for any sort of activity that you would use them in anyway. The one Escanor's Relic is basically useless. It's basically just going to give you stats at this point because it is a PvP only Relic, and it's also a pretty bad Relic. He's not PvP relevant anymore. Probably can skip that one if you are not using him or whatever the case may be. Gowther is an interesting one. A lot of people were super skeptical on building Gowthers at the beginning. I don't think it's super necessary. It doesn't work in Deathmatch. It doesn't work in PvP. And most of the time, unless you're just using him in like a Demonic Beast battle, which most battles don't use Gowther, you're really not going to be in the activity long enough to even see this like get max stacks or anything, and even then it's only a 10% at max to basic stats, so not really great, but it is 4 characters, so it's a decent amount of like CC increase there. Festival Merlin is okay. It's not a bad Relic at all. There are times where she kind of shows back up in the PvP meta from time to time, but it's normally because her damage cap is being abused by recovery rate sets or just random stuff that people come up with to basically make her immortal. So I don't know that I would really recommend it, but she is like the best DPS character for Grey Demons still, as far as I know. So you could potentially put it on her for some more stats or a little bit more damage for that, I guess, but not sure I would go all the way out of my way to grab that one, if I'm being honest. Awakened Easton is okay. I don't think that this is super great, but from time to time there are scenarios where this Halloween Easton is kind of nice. And if you're running Catastrophes, this Red Easton is pretty nice. So if you want to grab it for extra CC and you already run Catastrophes, it could be okay. Shin's is... It's pretty good overall. It's a pretty decent damage dealt boost. So I would say that it's really good if you're going to use Green Shin as a farmer. Realistically, Red Shin is almost never used in the game at this point, so I don't know that I would recommend that. I do think that base Merlin's is actually halfway decent because it's a damage dealt increase to unknown race, or for your unknown race allies, and on top of that you can just use the green Merlin in the back as a sub-slot character anyway to gain ultimate move gauge. She's almost like a decent replacement for Rom for the unknown team, because she's a collab character that you can't get access to unless the collab is active at the moment, and that's almost never. So she's like a halfway decent like unknown backliner, but the problem is a lot of the unknown teams already use Infinity Merlin, so it's not super great. It's an okay Relic, but I don't know that I'd go out of my way. Summer Merlin has kind of dropped off the face of the earth, and the Green Merlin is pretty bad, so I don't really recommend this at the moment, especially with the meta being the way that it is. But hey, I mean, if the meta ends up shifting to a position to where the cleanses aren't as relevant, she could see a resurgence, so might be worth it in the future. Base Roxy is pretty bad. Her Relic is literally just a stat increase, so that way she gains more CC. Not really worth getting, because honestly none of these Roxys are really worth using besides maybe the green one, and even then it's very niche. I think this Awakened Valenti was one of the very last ones that I got, just because I already don't use Awakened Valenti at all, so I don't really recommend that. Green Valenti is okay if you're going to use her for like some of the Demonic Beast cheese teams that there are. You can run her with Chad King and basically make like an impenetrable shield. I don't think her Relic even really helps with that at all, so you don't have to go for it if you don't want to, so probably a pass on that one. Blue Magelda is the best bird farming unit ever. and the red Magelda gets 0 use out of the relic, so take that into consideration. But if you're going to be fighting the bird and you already have blue Magelda, I highly recommend you grab her Holy Relic first, because it's going to make fighting the bird like so much easier. It's so good. You can stack it with any sort of amplify unit, mainly Trader Melee, and they're going to basically hit damage cap almost every single time, and it's just going to help your team overall do more damage, tank more. You know, they just get good buffs from this Holy Relic. So I highly recommend this one first over any other relic, preferably. Sigurd's is okay at best. It's kind of okay. It's a PvP only relic, and he's not very PvP relevant, to be honest, so can't really recommend it. Brunhild's is pretty good. I actually like the fact that you can only be debuffed 1 time, and you get a buff for being debuffed. I think that's kind of cool. Overall, she does a pretty good amount of damage. She can be used on the Ragnarok team if you have the red one, or the green one is just a mega DPS when it comes to PvE activities, so that one's okay. I would say it's pretty decently worth getting. Festival Gother, on the other hand, is a good relic overall, but the fact that you have to get your ultimate move gauge completely full can be a bit niche. It's kind of hard to do, especially if you're running him in like PvP, because he can just easily be killed off pretty quickly. But overall, I like that relic quite a bit. It's really good for just doing like really big damage. Not sure if it's like super meta relevant anymore, but if you want to mess around with that, I would recommend it. It's pretty cool. Alione's is pretty bad. I think that was actually the very last relic that I got. It's okay at best. Twiggo's is actually pretty useful if you're going to run like ult rush teams, because it immediately puts a taunt on him, and he gains a good amount of HP related stats, so he becomes really tanky. Jillian's is pretty bad. Not really any real reason to build it. Marmus is really like memey, like you can use it as like an ult rush team with Lostbane or blue Lostbane Meliodas, which is kind of funny, but overall not really worth having. Gilthunder's was basically just for the stats, along with Hauser's and Griamor's. They're all pretty bad. They're basically like ult gauge sort of dependent, and they basically boost stats that are just kind of mediocre at best. Slater's is okay. I don't really think you have to go out of your way to get it, but I do like the base red Slater quite a bit, and just having the Holy Relic for him, it makes him a little bit more useful, I guess, but odds of this character critting to actually, you know, get the stacks on this is probably pretty low, and Zaratros is pretty disappointing. It's literally just his passive, but it makes it available to be used in PvP, so not really even that good. So overall, I highly recommend you get Mageldas if you're going to be farming the bird at some point in the future anyway, so that way you can have a better time at getting the rest of these relics. But other than that, I would say maybe Bonds, so that way you can have Ragnarok Bond get more CC, and then maybe any of the festival characters you want. Maybe Gothers if you really want it. Christmas Lilias is okay, and there's some odd ones here or there that can be useful from time to time if you're going to use those characters. But honestly, the bird relics aren't that great anymore, so hopefully they add new bird relics sometime in the future. If at all possible, if you already have the ones that you already like, I guess there's always potential that we could get new relics in the future, so you might be able to just hold on to them and maybe get lucky if they add new ones. You could grab it as soon as it releases, but I wouldn't get my hopes up on that too much. Yeah, either way, let me know what your thoughts and opinions are. If you have a relic that you really recommend somebody get, leave it down in the comments below, but that is pretty much going to be it from me. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.